Hello and welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. It is a pleasure to welcome you all back here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. It's Wednesday, time for another show, time for another amazing guest. And it's been a long time in the making. And finally, we have Casey here with us from Crux Cigars, coming all the way to us from Boca Raton over in Florida. Casey, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us and taking the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, it has been a long time coming. I mean, there's life chases you away and we get busy and then you try to schedule things but I'm happy to be here today. It's a great week because I'm home in Florida, which is nice. And we just had one of our 2 trade shows for the year last week. So definitely knew it was going to be an at-home week. So wanted to get back to, South Florida in Boca Raton. And I'm actually coming from our distribution center warehouse here and wanted to sit down with you guys and have a cigar and look forward to speaking more.
Beautiful. As always, for all of you who join us on a regular basis, you know the spiel. If you have questions, for all of you here at the lounge, just make yourselves heard. Put something in the chat box. For everybody watching over on Facebook, all the various live streams, you can comment underneath the posting. I'm always checking the live stream so we can bring your questions to Casey and discuss them here at the lounge. Now, Casey, let me start with, we just off the record spoke a little bit about music and all of your various talents. I know that you have a colorful and illustrious history with golfing, sports, and the entrepreneurial journey. Did you ever think that you would end up in the cigar industry, or would you say it was a mere coincidence and you're just happy that it so happened?
Well, the family history goes back to my great-great-grandfather, who actually rolled cigars in the early 1800s really? in central Minnesota. We actually found that out after we started the cigar company, so we can't really play back to that. But fast forward, a couple hundred years, my cousin Jeff, owner and president of our company, he started in the early 90s. He started as a retailer in the early 90s, in his early 20s. And I kind of grew up around him a little bit, in and out. We're cousins, so we weren't always together, but knowing him and then being in high school and getting to college, like we spent some time together, and like cigars were, they were always cool, and there was always that fascination of what he was doing was super cool, how that would be cool. And then when I got done with college, like, we started partnering up and I started working at one of his shops, and then I was playing baseball and I'd work with him in the off season. And so there wasn't ever like this whole, I want to be in cigars, but they were just always around. They were super cool. He was in them. And then, he gave me some options right after college. And then we had talked about furthering those options, in the future, but, we weren't ready for this. And that was in the late 2000s. And then, half a decade later, him and I come together and we kind of launched this company with our business partner. And, now we're looking at, this year will be 8 years since Crux has been on the market.
It's a super interesting story. And I feel like Crux has become such a popular brand in the US. Unfortunately, yet for the international markets, we still have to wait a little bit until we can enjoy your cigars over here on this side of the pond. But with everything that you described, that fascination that sort of sucked you into the business, would you say that was more on the cigar side, or was it for the entrepreneurial vision of your cousin? What was it that pulled you in and finally convinced you, like, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to be?
Well, initially, cigars were always just a means of celebration. And like, for me, it was like, oh, we did something great, let's celebrate. We did something great, let's celebrate. And then he'd be like, well, let's celebrate every day. So like, you know what I mean? Like, why not? So that was an interest, which was fun. It was that luxurious lifestyle. It was cool. It was unique. It was, we're talking, 15 years ago when I started smoking cigars, or more. But then there was the whole, family business. Like, Jeff, I've always been, one of those people I've looked up to in my whole life. He was always he's 14 years older than I am. And he always drove fancy cars, had cool watches, lived that luxurious lifestyle. And that was cool. So that was a fascination. But then being able to be in business with him, cigars, family. I mean, he's the older brother I've never had. And it was one of those where when the opportunity arose, yeah, tobacco is definitely his passion first and foremost. He's been in the business for, I think, since '92. But for me, it was that fascination and the history of just wanting to be a part of that, and then learning about the tobacco over the process, spending time in the factories, the fields, the farms, and then really feeding off of his true passion, has made cigars and the whole process super incredible for me. Like I mean, he's opened my eyes to so many different things, from the first time we went down to the factory to learning to blending cigars, and now the whole entrepreneurial side of, yeah, don't get me wrong, who wants to have a 9 to 5? I mean, like, I don't know anybody that truly loves a 9 to 5. I don't care who you are.
That's not to
like
say that most people, well, can escape it or are still being trapped in it, though.
Oh yeah, and if the opportunity arises for a great opportunity to do something truly unique, like it's always been kind of a fascination for the unusual lifestyle, I think. And people say, what do you do? Oh, well, we own a cigar manufacturing company. Like, that's cool. You know, like, yeah, we have the naysayers that say cigars are bad. And obviously we know they're wrong because they're absolutely delicious. But for us, it's truly family business. And now we have another cousin of ours who worked with us too since then, the last couple of years. And it's one of those where just the whole encompass of the way we went about it, to building it, to succeeding in it, and then now rebranding, and now where we are 8 years later, again, in the domestic market, you know, like we're getting close to that tipping point. So stay tuned, you know, give me a little bit more time, but you can always blame me 100% for the reason why you don't have cigars over there, because it's 100% my fault. Not trying to grow too big too fast, working with good strategic partners, but
only way to do.
One day, and like we talked about jumping over there, and offline we said it a little bit, but I think this might be the year that I attend the Dortmund show, because it's obviously going to be probably the largest iconic cigar show in the world, and I haven't attended it yet, and we won't be a distributor or a displayer quite this year, but I hope that, you know, the world opens and gives us the opportunity to, at least for me to attend. And I think my cousin's been there years ago, just as a retailer, but just to start those processes to truly get the opportunity to meet, connect, socialize with that market. Basically the rest of the world market is essentially that is. I mean, we have a show in the United States, and then Dortmund has the show for the rest of the world. And it's exciting times for Crux Cigars, because we are to the point where we feel like it's soon. But we still have grown our company strategically over the last 8 years, very, very methodically. And we want to stay on that path, but we truly look forward to larger experiences and, you know, being international.
Casey, speaking of the growth element and the way you structured your business, you were on the entrepreneurial journey before. You mentioned your cousin Jeff, who was a shop and lounge operator for many years before starting Crux Cigars. How would you say that those previous experiences of yours have truly influenced the way that you set up the company, the way you think about the long-term perspective, and just how you want to operate and build this thing for the future?
I think kind of working backwards like that, from the consumer to manufacturing. I mean, when we first started, obviously Jeff had years and years of brick and mortar retail experience, and I'd worked in the shops for a few years, so I had a little bit. But then I worked in other, you know, retail as well, so I had, you know, 7-8 years of retail experience to see what the end consumer is looking for. But I think if you work backwards through that, and then partnering with such great business partners like we did with originally Nestor Plasencia out of Nicaragua, like kind of tying that, it was kind of when they started launching their brand as well. And then you have a manufacturer and essentially a farmer, you know, and then you have a retailer, kind of closing the gaps between the two and kind of working themselves towards from the other spectrum. So getting to see what obviously the end consumers are into, at least in the domestic market, I think has phenomenal experience that allows you to know, like, okay, this is what they smoke. This is the avenue that they have. This is the fads that happen. These are the things, more importantly, not to do. And our packaging shows a huge piece of being retailer first, which we can get into whenever we talk packaging. But our packaging has a huge reason for retailer first, and then different blends. Like there's not a whole lot of in our portfolio that's super strong, and nothing that's super light, because most of the cigar market is in that mild plus to medium plus bodied cigars. You just want clean finishing tobaccos. You want cigars that taste good, that you can smoke one after another. And especially for newer cigar smokers, the last thing they want to say is, I don't want to taste it tomorrow. And obviously, if you smoke unfermented poor tobacco, you will taste it for a month. But if you smoke clean, consistent, quality tobacco, I mean, you don't wake up the next day with that morning breath and that afternoon breath and the evening breath for the next day. So our focus was always incredible product, incredible quality, incredible consistency. And that starts with, quality control and, spending time down there for years before we even launched, Jeff did, and kind of mending that, farming to brick and mortar to consumer, kind of together was, I think, crucial. I mean, I think that's probably the single most important reason that we have had the aggregate success over the last 8 years, because of strategic moves to get closer to the consumer. Because we were consumers, we didn't manage consumers on a daily basis. For Jeff did for, I think now, 92 to now, shit, that's, what is that, 30 years?
That's impressive. Yeah. In general, do you think that it might be fair to say that brands of cigars that were built by people who had previous experience in the retail space have more of that, and thus are prone for success, whereas some other brands might have more of an artistic appeal to them, or somebody who just wants to, I'll do my thing and my way or no way, and it feels more like they're trying to bring something to the market that they love, and then let's see whether it sticks with everybody else.
I think, from looking at it from the two perspectives, I think you just fail differently early on. I think you're going to fail from the beginning. You're going to have failures every day. You're going to have failures through whatever process, whatever avenue you take as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you're going to fail. But how do you overcome those failures? And I think you just fail differently. And if you can overcome those failures, for us, it was quality control, it was consistency, it was blending, it was, there was different obstacles that arose for us versus somebody that grew up in a tobacco field knows that better. But then maybe you branded poorly, maybe you don't know how to display it properly because you've never been in a retail store. So I think you just fail differently. I don't think one way is better than the other. I think obviously eventually, if you are adaptable and you're ready for change, and also you listen to the end consumer, because the end consumer at the end of the day is the only thing that matters. Nothing else matters, because they're the ones that buy the product. So if you're more than happy to understand that here's something that they're looking for, here's a product that we can supply. I don't think one avenue is right or wrong. I think there's just different obstacles at the beginning, and having strategic partners that you learn in the earliness of any company is crucial to your success. And thankfully, we partnered with some really, really, really good people. And we failed, and we learn every day. Like we continue. We went through a rebranding a few years ago, and I wouldn't say what we did wrong in the beginning was a failure, but I think what we did right was to get us to the point. And obviously now we're flourishing over the last couple of years, and as numbers will show, sales and our reach and our popularity. And it's all about creating a consumer product that is quality, consistent, and more important, recognizable.
Do you have specific experiences from the past and quote unquote failures that on the one hand, you would love to not do again, but then maybe some others where you feel like I'd love to always do them again because they were crucial in the evolution of the brand?
I think the biggest thing that I would have changed was to have a lot more money when we started, because it would have been a lot easier with more inventory. The biggest problems we ran into was inventory problems, and it was based on not being able to order large enough. And we're not talking large numbers for a normal company, but the investment was, Jeff came and he started the company, and I wasn't a very, very multimillionaire. So I didn't have a bunch of capital to throw in. I had time and I had some experience in manufacturing. And so obviously it takes a lot more money than you think. People at that time in the late 2000s were, trying to start cigar brands every day. This was before FDA in the United States. This was before all the regulations. This was before everything. So people were showing up with, 10, 20 grand and trying to create cigar companies. Well, we didn't do it that way. We obviously started with quite a bit more than that, but even that fell short. So the biggest thing would have been, okay, how much money is it going to take? Times it by 10 and understand that just to get it to a brand where we want to talk about it in decades, like we could have probably got to where we are faster had we not kept it on our own shoulders and, either taken loans or found other business partners to financially back it. But that was something we at the time chose not to do because we wanted it to be ours, and we wanted to, there was sweat equity there that we wanted to put in. And, so you get to a point, but the failures about learning about tobacco, the failures about, trying different things, those failures, I think you have to go through. Because if everything just goes easy and you see it, and I mean, I grew up in sports, so there's a lot of failure in sports, especially my dad's been a baseball coach since the, mid 70s. And I grew up playing baseball, and it's a game of failure. It's just like life. Like if you succeed all the time, you don't learn anything because life becomes easy. And if you don't have the obstacles and the failures. So the biggest failures for us was just understanding the whole process of, even time management, from how long does it take? We love this tobacco. We love this leaf. We love this flavor. We want this, learning the blending process. And, things take time. Like this is a natural product that is grown and hand rolled. Like you can't say, I need 1 million of these tomorrow. Like you can't turn on a switch and get the manufacturing process going like what you do widgets and say, we'll just make another 1,000 million widgets. Like the time management is huge. That's one of the things that I've learned. And then obviously being able to have the story and create new products, and there's trial and error. I mean, you think you learn and you learn and you learn and you have a lot of blends, and then you think more. And when Jeff's blending, but things become harder. Tobaccos change. Things become not available. And we don't farm, so we don't have total control. But it's uniquely different for the fact that you can control what you decide to control. And if you are having an issue, you just understand that let's find a solution. And it's either buying more tobacco, it's either having different partners, it's either supplementing something, changing something, killing a brand. And we've had to do all the above. So I think the obstacles that we've overcome have only made us stronger. But I will say the one thing, if we would have started with a lot more money, that would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. Brief question on that monetary aspect. Would you say that is primarily for cash flow reasons and making sure that you have enough inventory, as you said in the beginning, or is it primarily a means of marketing, trying to grow faster, get into that rhythm of the cash flow?
I think it's specific to the amount of holding costs you have in actual finished product. To buy boxes, to buy bands, to buy tobacco, to buy cigars, to warehouse it, to have it on hand. So it's essentially, sellable inventory. I mean, there's a whole lot of, from a marketing standpoint, like we don't really do direct marketing. We don't do print marketing. We don't do internet marketing. We do essentially social media. So we pay somebody to do that, but that's photography and that kind of stuff. But it's pretty organic for us. But for us, it's, if you open 20 accounts and you forecast them to sell X amount of cigars and they sell X plus, can you open 5 more? Can you open 10 more? Can you open 100 more stores? And the last thing you want to do is spend all that effort and getting placement in humidors, building retail partners, and then not have product, because then you lose your shelf space. Everything you've achieved goes away. So I think thinking about, X plus for inventory reasons, if you think you need 10,000 cigars, you should have 50,000 cigars, because if you make good cigars, people are going to smoke them. And for us, it was always like, oh, awesome. We just opened our first 25 accounts. Let's start there. Now we have our first 100, and now let's get more. And now let's do this. And you just run into issues working in third world countries that you never knew would arise. And you didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. We didn't know there was going to be FDA regulations. We didn't know there was going to be deforestation problems. In 8 years, I feel like we've gone through about every issue in this country that you can possibly do. And we're still here. And it's just over and over and over a new obstacle. But if you're willing to, strive to correct the issue, I think, once we all get through the end of this pandemic, or whatever the newest pandemic may be, like, we'll have a lot of quality cigar companies that figure it out, and will, more importantly, which I already think we do, but have probably the best cigars in the marketplace as a industry than have ever been on the market than before. Like when the boom happened in the mid 90s, there was some bad cigars being made. Like, they were bad. Quality control was low, tobacco was poor, but now with the evolution of the growth of the industry over the last, multiple decades, we were a little bit more available to make that transition into a lot more cigars. I don't know the numbers that came out of, that imported into the United States or around the world from last year yet, but I mean, when I talk to, our business partners down there, and they say, here's how many cigars came from Nicaragua, Dominican, Honduras, Cuba, wherever, to around the world, like, that number was substantial last year, and a substantial growth. And I think 30 years ago, that volume in uptick wouldn't have happened without the systems that we have, with the best tobaccos that are being made, the best farmers that are using it, and the technologies that we have to make. I mean, right now is the time where there's never been more impressive cigars as an industry on the market. And that's something we're all proud of.
Based on the feedback that you're getting from the market, from your customers, do you feel like that growth is organic and reasonable, and primarily down to new people coming in, or is it much rather the old guy who's now smoking 2 cigars a day instead of 2 cigars a week?
I think the biggest thing over the transition in the last 18 months, specifically up to 2 years, has just been the available time people have, because they are secluding themselves. They are staying away. They've created these things. They have more disposable income if they've had the work from home jobs, because you're not going to dinner as much. You're not traveling as much. You're not going to concerts, movies. You're just, looking for basically intimate hobbies that you and your family, or you and your closest friends have. And I think that's made the typical cigar smoker smoke more or more frequently. And I also think it's intrigued more people to say, what do I want to do on a beautiful day? And I can't go anywhere for the last year, and I'm sitting at home and I got a balcony and cigars look pretty cool. Why not try it now? Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of this mini boom is starting to plateau a little bit, but it was definitely like new cigar smoker, and it's definitely not the old cigar smoker. The new cigar smoker, they're in your mid to late 20s. They're getting into it because, social media is happening. You have those kind of information that's now readily available, and they look for luxurious hobbies. I mean, everybody has that vision of, how do I be luxurious? For me, and whatever that may be, if it's enjoying don't get me wrong, a very, very, very expensive consumable product is a cigar. I mean, minimum $10 for a quality cigar, not minimum, but run around, let's just say average price cigar is $10. Like, that's an hour of your time. And if you're smoking, a drink, a cigar, or whatever, I mean, that can be an expensive hobby. So I think seeing the availability and the networking of cigars as a whole, and more importantly, extra capital available for extra income, or disposable income, excuse me, that's available for consumers. Because I mean, I know things that I'm getting into now that I was like, I never had this much money in my life, because I'm not going out to dinner 4 or 5 nights a week. I haven't been traveling for vacations. We missed 2 or 3 big vacations. You got a little bit extra coin in your pocket, and whatever your hobby is, you find something else, because we all aren't living to go to work. We're all here to enjoy life, and cigars, seem to be very enjoyable.
So we mentioned the word mini boom, and obviously you're working with absolute powerhouses of the industry, with your amazing connections to the Plasencia family, with AJ. You have some of the biggest guys in the industry working for you, working with you on Crux Cigars. Is it in times of boom even more troublesome or somewhat challenging for you to make sure that you always have enough product, and that you as a customer are being taken care of by those individuals as well? Or, like, to put it differently, would you possibly be worried about being left behind when it comes to supply and demand, production capacities and all that, when working with large entities that probably have so many different mouths to feed and probably not enough raw materials, skilled rollers and all that?
I can definitely, I mean, thankfully for us, we were primed to make that move to grow our company 2 years ago, because we had just rebranded, which I do want to get into in a minute, but after this. And we had so what we do is we also secure our tobacco for a few years. We buy a lot of raw tobacco that's ours. Yes, it's held at their factories, they have it, but we buy it and secure it for a year to 18 to 2 years out before it's even rolled. So we already knew we were getting ready, and then it's all about having the best roller. We have rollers that roll specifically our cigars. So generally we operate as kind of like a mini factory in their factory, other than that they handle all the training, all the overseeing, the people, and all we do is blend, oversee quality control, and then, obviously the final product and all the designs and all that. But so you could definitely get lost behind if you aren't on top of it. But we've had these business relationships now, like I said, since 2000. Well, we first sold our first cigar in 2014, but that goes back years with the Plasencia family. And I want to say right around 14 or 15 is when we started some business with AJ, from either buying different tobaccos or having him roll our cigar, which one of our cigars for us. But there's always that struggle, because if there's new projects, I mean, we haven't come up with new cigars other than some line extensions in quite a while because of that issue. So that is one of the issues. It's harder to come out with new products because there is a lot less available raw tobaccos for us to try new things with. But as we continually acquire and purchase our current stuff, like, we've just even been more successful because the relationship has gone back. Yeah, going into it, if we wanted to start a brand new company today, they might just say, we're not taking new customers, because why, it's like anything. Why would we start with a small fish when we can't even support the big fish? So I think because of where we put ourselves going into this mini boom and this pandemic and all this other garbage that's gone through that world we're in, but we were primed and we got lucky. I mean, there's nothing besides the fact that we got lucky, and we were ready to kind of like expand, hired new people literally in January of 2 years ago. And then 8 weeks later, everybody's at home. So we were at that piece of, we've been doing this for 5 years, and it's about ready to kind of, pop off for us. And we just got lucky. The timing played perfectly. The boom happened at a good time, and we had cigars, and we had built a new warehouse, and we're getting ready to expand our warehouse. And we were in it for a year, and we're already like, it's too small. And at the time it was 10 times more than we had, And so we sit here and we think back, what if, but I think we got lucky. I mean, we put ourselves in a position to be successful, but I think it couldn't have been a better time for our company than a little mini boom to happen. Was kind of when we were primed and ready.
Good to hear. Casey, you want to talk about the rebranding a little bit, and let's take the opportunity and give us probably a little bit of a rundown of the Crux portfolio. because also linked to that, our dear friend Mark over on Facebook posted a question as to when will Crux reintroduce the Passport and the Crux Classic. So
I'm going to do a quick little revert to just some history. So obviously the domestic market has heard a lot of this, but the international market has not seen us. So Crux started in 2014 after a few years of research and development by my cousin Jeff Haugen, who has been a retailer since the early 90s. He spent from 2011 to 2013 traveling to Nicaragua every month, learning the blending process, learning a SWOT analysis in each factory to kind of just understand, 2 years of truly that hard knock schooling for himself from everybody. I mean, he went into every factory, Dominican, Honduras, Nicaragua, and finally we settled, I say settled, but finally we selected to choose to start our first brands with the Plasencia family. And then in 2014, Jeff launched 6 different brands and 6 blends. And, we picked up our first, 2,500 accounts in that first year and a half or so. And we had a lot of momentum moving forward, needing some different products. Obviously, we wanted to make things that don't, cannibalize each other. So looking for different tobaccos. And then in 2017, after we found a cigar that we wanted to make at AJ's, that was the Maduro that came out in 2018. And then we were primed and ready, and we were kind of moving along and making cigars and growing annually, and had a nice, sustainable little company, and we were not satisfied. We wanted to figure out, how do we create a brand that is more national to the ability to be an international brand instead of a more regional feel. I mean, we were known around the country, but we were in a 150 to 200 accounts, and it was just a nice little company. But we knew we needed representation, better marketing, better packaging. So what we did in 2018, we started the process for a rebranding, because everybody say cool logo, what's it say? I can't read it. What cigar is that? And as you can see over over this shoulder, it's a legible logo now. And before it was very hieroglyphic, kind of mid-Eastern, medieval. But the biggest thing that we did is we made everything very colorful, very recognizable. But what we do in our packaging, I'm going to adjust this just for a second. A box does come represented like this. You do see singles on this side and 5-packs on this side, which I'll get into in a second. We also have a flavor meter and strength profile here. So basically you have everything you need as a consumer by yourself to help select a Crux cigar from a sea of brown and a humidor. And obviously many, many, many points of recognition for a legible logo, bright colors, clean, classic, elegant taste. But for us, it was, how do you become recognizable in a sea of a humidor that's full of thousands and thousands of cigars? So, for us, it's these soft touch recycled cardboard refill packs that stand up very nicely, which they sit on a shelf just like this. So there's 3-dimensional marketing here that comes in. You walk into a humidor, you see dimension, you see colors, you see brightness. And this is one of our boxes. This is, I would call, kind of a sky blue. We also have a Tiffany blue color-ish, trademark pending. And then we have reds, we have greens, we have oranges, we have blacks. I mean, but everything is very consistent from the box, where it looks very white, very clean, very classic, very legible. And then the color is very bright. From a marketing standpoint, we found that being able to have the customer recognize your brand is huge, a legible logo. Secondly, have your customer remember which cigar in your brand that they smoked. So there's at least 3 points of recognition on every box with the name. We have an icon and a color for every package. So I like the Crux blue. I like the Crux red. I like the Bull and Bear, the Epicure. I mean, those are, whatever makes them remember, we don't care. We just want to know, if you enjoyed our cigar, that you can find it and smoke it, for decades to come. So that came out in 2019 at our, domestic trade show called the PCA. And we've been flying with that for 2.5 years. And it's some unique packaging that I think people are really finding Now it's really helpful with, deforestation problems, and wood is very difficult. We have, like I said, we have a refill program that these are all made on recycled cardboard out of Costa Rica. And these packs are a point of purchase pack where they look very, very sellable, and it's very soft touch. So we don't need as many boxes. We're wasting a lot less wood, and we're able to fill it that way. As well as keep costs down, as well as keep our prices economical instead of having massive increases on an annual basis like a lot of companies. We want to try to make a premium product for a minimal price as we can put on the market. So trying to keep around that $10 to $13. I mean, I remember even a decade ago it was $8 to $10. Now we're at 10 to 13, and as an industry in our country with no tax. That's before you had your state tax or your local tax, whatever it is. But cigars, finding ways to manufacture them at the most economical process is crucial, because there's going to be a ceiling at some point where people say that's too much for that luxurious product. So we have done a lot of great things and able to keep our products as inexpensive, not cheap, because we make quality cigars, but we want them to be palatable for in flavor as well as in your pocketbook.
Let's get back to the question from Mark briefly. He was curious about whether or not, or when you will bring back and reintroduce the Passport and the Crux Classic.
So I got some good news and some bad news for him. The good news is the Passport we are working on right now. We hope to launch that sometime either this year or next year. Just based on, originally it was based on, it's a very complex blend. The Passport is an Ecuadorian Habano wrapper, Nicaraguan filler binder, that just one of Jeff's first blends. It's actually, I think it's his favorite cigar that he's ever blended, but it was a very complex blend. And in order to keep that process up with the amount of manufacturing, we only had one pair that could really roll that cigar, because it's a super complex blend. It was one of his first blends. It wasn't, let's call it roller friendly. So it became very, very tedious. And then if it wasn't done right, it was wrong, and we couldn't pass that in quality inspection. So we came into some issues with the fact that it was a cigar that anything that we brought to the country was just a lot more work, because we had to fail and we had to say, well, you did a good job, but this isn't it. So when you're working with fractions of tobacco pieces for a blend, and especially in the fillers, so we have changed the sizes a little bit, and we're working on making it a little bit more blender friendly, so we can at least come back with a few sizes in that cigar. And I mean, the Corona, we had a 5.5 by 42 that when perfectly done, very floral, very, very, very palatable. I mean, I remember smoking some of those cigars, 5, 6, 7 years ago that were absolutely incredible. So we've done the branding, we've done the marketing, we've got everything else ready to go. So we've spent the investment from a financial side to put that into motion. We're just making sure it's perfect. And not only that, is we also have to create more and more inventory, because it's not the easiest blend still. So the production numbers will be lower, but we still have to get them at least balanced to a place where we can sell them to, I mean, now we're in 350 plus stores across the country. And so we want to be able to offer it to everybody, not just selects, and maybe that's an option. But the bad news is the Crux Classic, we can't make anymore. There was a filler in there that we bought basically what we thought we could continue to get more of. And we sold it for 4 years, I think. And the new crops, the new difference, it just wasn't the same. The tobacco was not the same experience. So instead of replacing it and changing the cigar, we just decided to end that line. Because if you're smoking a Crux Classic, you remember a Crux Classic. And I mean, I might have a few boxes squirreled away for me, because I think that's a fantastic cigar too. But the difference is, like, we couldn't mass produce it anymore, and it just wasn't the same. So you move on, and then you create new products. But we are working on a new product that you haven't seen or heard probably, is called the Epicure Habano, which was something that would be an iteration from our other epicures, because we have a Connecticut and a Maduro. So we are working on a Habano project that will be our next release sometime, hopefully this year, if we can get it out. But you have to be able to build consistent cigars. And the last thing you want to do, I don't care if it's a $2 cigar or a $20 cigar or a $100 cigar, if you know what you're buying and you show up and you get something different, you're let down. You could, don't get me wrong, if you're a $2 cigar guy and you buy that cigar, you just want it to taste that every time. If it's scotch, if it's beer, if it's wine, you just want that consistency of your product. So you want to get what you're paying for. And we have the highest quality of standards of consistency. So we couldn't keep that cigar consistent. So unfortunately, the Classic is no longer being produced, which is a little sad, but we'll make different cigars, and there'll be other great cigars that we fall in love with, but that's one that you won't see anymore.
I would love to come back to the portfolio topic in just a second, but in the meantime, our dear friend Charlie from Boston had a wonderful comment and a thought about packaging in general and the way that he's perceiving it in the market. Welcome, Charlie.
Greetings, Casey. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with all of us. I've been down to Cuba and Honduras and Nicaragua 3 times, and the Dominican Republic several times for all the cigar festivals. And what's always amazing to me is how great these cigars are, but how badly people do in branding of just the packaging. They spend a lot of money on labels. They spend a lot of money on boxes and on marketing, and yet they don't realize that most of everybody on this video cast and everybody else are over the age of 40, and they can't see squat. And so when you get a label that you've got a font size that's small, or it's script, and a point size that you can't read, and what I was very pleased to see is a lot of thought goes into your thinking relative to the way your product is being presented, and you can actually read the labels, you can read the boxes, and it's amazing to me when Camacho came out with their new branding and their new boxes. I thought it was brilliant because you could actually see the box, the label, the name across the room, and I thought from a retailer's perspective, I'm not a retailer, that would be just great because you can actually show the product. And we all have a ton of cigars from a lot of different vendors, and you pull a cigar out of your humidor and you're looking at it and you're scratching your head and you're just trying to say, who made this cigar? What's the brand? How do I keep all my labels, but then I look at them and say, how do I even remember how to go out and buy some more of these cigars if I can't even read the label? So it's just amazing to me. You get it, but so many of your other colleagues in the industry just don't. Good for you.
Thank you very much. And I mean, yeah, it's a huge part of it. I mean, we kind of had unlegible bands before, and we tried to originally launch our company into the humidor that we knew. And you kind of have to be a little bit of a disruptor to be a new guy on the block and be a little different, because if you just follow everything else, I mean, what separates yourself from anybody else? I mean, we're all using premium tobacco. We're all using of select countries. We're all, it becomes a marketing ploy based on, obviously there's different recipes and different tobaccos. And, when you originally blend, where does this come from? What factory? Who does this taste like? Well, it tastes like Crux because of the places we source tobacco, the factories we use, but then more importantly, like you expect a certain product that you can now find, you can read, and you're drawn to. I mean, if you take something out of the cigar business, like if you're a wine or a scotch person and like you walk into a conglomerate of a liquor store, and even me as a consumer, like that's kind of how we look at things. And like I walk down a scotch aisle, yeah, I'm going to buy the bottle of scotch that I like, but I'm also going to want to try something new. And then it comes down to what? Packaging. It comes down to recognition. It comes down to flavor notes. It comes down to anything that's going to draw my attention. Obviously, then there's expert ratings and there's these people that are supposed to help you, but half a dozen, 10 to 1 the other, it feels like I ask them for their opinion, and their opinion to me doesn't fit my palate. So I want to learn about it. I want to read about it. I want to have the opportunity to truly experience it for the first time by myself. And when I'm a Scotch guy, so like I have scotches that I drink all the time and scotches that I'm used to, but I still go in and try to find something new because I haven't experienced it all. And I think that's kind of how a cigar consumer looks at it. Thankfully, you can go through a lot of different cigars a lot quicker than a different bottle of scotch, because if I was going through a different bottle of scotch every day, probably wouldn't get a whole lot done. But you can smoke a different cigar, multiple different cigars in a day, or multiple different cigars every week. And then you can truly be more well-versed. So I think that recognition, as well as that kind of that disruption of the traditional norm, has been very successful for us.
Thank you, Charlie. And on top of that, Casey, one thing that always strikes me is when looking at a company's portfolio, I think it's interesting to, when we look at Crux portfolio, for example, you seem to take a rather clear and concise path with the overall assortment of cigars that you're offering, which gives the consumer at least some sort of guidance or a clear indication as to where am I headed and what can I expect from the smoking experience. Whereas with other brands, you immediately feel overwhelmed by roughly 200 different SKUs, and then you have absolutely no idea as to what should I grab, what should I light up. Is that on purpose for you as well?
Well, for us, we always looked at it from the standpoint of, we launched 6 blends when we first came out in 2014. Weirdly enough, we've come out with new ones, but we still have 6 brands in our portfolio. We've obviously eliminated some over the course, just like we talked about the classic, but it's strategic, because if you spend the time and effort into creating a product that you think is worthy of putting your own brand on it, and at Crux Cigars, if we want to put our labels on it, like, it's not something we just say slap a bunch of tobacco together and we got to come up with something new. Like, our last new brand, our new blend came out 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. We have come out with obviously new vitolas and new shapes and done a lot of cool things. Obviously, it's been a little bit more difficult over the last 2 years, so we're probably a little bit longer than we would have been if the world hadn't done something different. But we don't want to create new products to cannibalize our current products. And as long as our current products are performing, we will continue with those products. So, when you're smoking Crux Cigars, you're getting products that are well thought out, for the fact that, we have a Connecticut, a Maduro, a Habano from a couple different countries. And we have smaller and larger ring gauge cigars. But I think we have 28 SKUs in our whole portfolio, and we have 6 different blends. And for us, it is, we're not completely well-rounded. We don't have a Cameroon. We need another Habano. We need, we don't have a broadleaf. Like, there's cigars we're working on, and Jeff continues to work and blend with them. But what we haven't done is just rush a Cameroon, a broadleaf cigar out to the market if we don't think it's worthy of a Crux label, because we want it to be good. We don't want that first consumer to be like, oh, I love broadleaf cigars. I've been a broadleaf smoker my whole life, and now I'm going to smoke this Crux broadleaf because I'm a broadleaf guy. And if it's not good, now Crux is a terrible initial impression, because initial impressions are eternal. And if we're going to find a Cameroon smoker, because one of my first favorite cigars I ever smoked was a Cameroon, but until we do it that we think it's worthy for our brand, we just leave it. We'll just leave it, on the bench. And so we're continue working to make some more well-rounded portfolio choices. But when we come out with something, we have the time, the effort, the energy, and most importantly, the cost of bringing something to market. It's expensive to bring a new cigar, and you don't want it to fail. And thankfully, we haven't had anything that really failed other than running out of tobacco. But because when you're selective and you do your due diligence and put time in, you feel more confident with the choices you make.
I very much like the fact that you also mentioned not cannibalizing one of your already existing lines. And even though everybody's always asking, so what's new, what's sort of the next big thing, you become a victim of that, always trying to innovate, always trying to bring something new. Whereas you have to give credit to a brand or a company that manages to build a legacy brand that can truly stand the test of time. And I mean, there's a reason why people keep coming back to their Don Carlos's, or like
it's that Cameroon I was talking about.
and or your traditional Padron smoke and stuff like those legacy brands, those lines of cigars that have truly stood the test of time. That's a massive achievement.
Yeah, I mean, and those, you just named two of the giants of that we all strive to be like. I mean, Padron, I think if there's any other company that you want to emulate, is Padron, who does it, I think, if not better than anybody in the world. They have incredible products. They have some of the best cigars on the market today. And they've been out for years. I mean, I still think, they just got #1 in Cigar Aficionado again. And like the 1964 Exclusivo Maduro, I think may or may not be in the conversation for the best cigars in the world. I know that's not the one that got the #1. They have a natural did, but I think, like, for me, like, they do it precise, they do it strategic, they do it at inventories they can control. And yeah, you have to, maybe piss some people along the way if you don't open an account with them, but you have to manage within. And they're going to make the amount of cigars that they can make at their pace, at their quality, that they expect to put their own brand on. And that's kind of a great model of, small business that says, we want to build a brand for decades. And we've always looked at this company as a brand we want to be around for decades. And it has a, not just a few years or 5 years or 10-year brand, but we were looking at it the other day. It's 30 years into this company. I'll be 60 years old, and that would be a momentous occasion. So we don't look at doing anything different. We look at building this brand for decades to come. So it is about making strategic choices versus sometimes financial choices. Obviously not making as much money or not spending as much money or doing different things that along the lines of it, you can look back and say, you know what, you built something, instead of, there's that whole glitz and glamour of, yeah, I could do this and get some quick cash, but is that the right way to build a brand that you can then obviously have that residual income in? And for us, it's about brand building more importantly, but obviously we create it with, unique and, delicious quality cigars.
Also going back to the retail discussion and keeping them and their operations in mind. I mean, when you spoke about the accounts that you open, and you also have to keep in mind, like, how many new SKUs or lines of cigars would a retailer stock when he's taking on a new brand? Like, if you open a new account, approximately how many SKUs will they carry in the first place?
Well, we kind of use that model that I think Nick Perdomo has done it as well as anybody, is like, give us a reasonable presentation of a reasonable representation in your humidor that shows us a block off little Stop and Shop. And you walk into the humidors that are just wall to wall with certain products, but then if everything gets lost. So because of the consistency in our packaging with the obviously different colors, we look to box it up with depending on size of humidor. Ideally you want to have I think it's 30 linear inches or 33 linear inches of space on one shelf, and then you start building that in, and kind of like you would in any grocery store. That visual representation. So we try to do 3x3 as a little bit of a spot. So you're looking at 9 facings to start for a smaller humidor, just so you can see it and it's not lost. But ideally, you take in every brand and you bring in 3 facings, and you end up with, for us, that's, well, let me do the math. It's 18 facings. We're minus 1 because one of them we do is a limited, so 15 facings. So 12 to 15 facings gives you a really beautiful representation, as well as a true, retailer shelf, and it stands out. Like, surprising because of the colors and the marketing that we've done. Like, everyone says, "Man, you guys are everywhere. We see you everywhere." I go, "No. Now you just see us." Like, yeah, we've opened a lot of accounts and we're growing and we're doing well, but now everywhere we are, people see us. Before, even though we were there before, you didn't see us because it was brown, it was flat, it wasn't recognizable, and they didn't know we were there. They'd be like, "Oh, I didn't know you sold cigars there." Well, yeah, but now you can't miss Crux Cigars and humidors because of the differentiation that we've done with our packaging.
And I fondly remember your cousin Jeff saying on another show and another podcast that cigar in a retail space are actually paying rent, and the longer they sit, the higher the rent.
Sure.
And you have to ask yourself, like, is it paying dividends? Is it paying its rent, right?
Yeah, we always say cigars aren't wallpaper. Like, you can't have wallpaper cigars. As a retailer, you can't have wallpaper cigars. Yeah, you're going to have some slower movers, but every cigar on that shelf needs to pay rent because it is in a climate controlled facility that only has so much space. I don't think you could ask any, or I don't think any retailer would say, I wish my humidor was smaller. Like, they always go, I built this big humidor and then 3 years later it's full, or a year later it's full, because there's so much good stuff out there. But if it's not making you money paying for that space, that climate controlled, and you need to make sure those products turn, and that's business. I mean, if you're a hobbyist and you're sitting at home and it's in your own humidor, you can age that cigar as long as you want, but you're not paying space for that anymore. I mean, you have a retail space that costs about as expensive as any, you know, space that, real estate is. I mean, is retail space. So no, you have to be able to make the money with each cigar, with each box, with each blend. And we want to be a part of the ones that obviously turn on a consistent basis.
Mm. And as you rightfully said, I mean, there's so many cigars out there. There's so many brands, so much good stuff to be had. And then at some point, it just becomes a competition of, if you want to get in, something else has to get out. And how do you gain that space? And once you're in there, defend it and make sure that you stay where you are.
Well, the biggest way is inventory. If you have cigars and they sell it, they're going to refill it. But if all of a sudden you have, you get those 12 facings, 15 facings on the shelf, and you run out of a SKU, well, they'll cinch up their humidors. They're not going to have empty spaces unless it comes like almost immediately. You're going to lose that real estate. And building a kind of that section kind of helps keep you with some more defense, some more elbows out that say, hey, this one's coming, but we still have these other 10 or 15. But you have to have inventory. And that's why strategically opening up certain accounts with certain inventories is really important. And overgrowth can be almost better or worse off than no growth. Because if you open too many accounts, and we have a list of accounts that we try to open, or distribution channels that we haven't done. Just why are we not in the European market? I don't have enough cigars, and both, and obviously creating an international company. We want to be able to give you the same cigar that you would smoke in my warehouse here as we would be able to send over there, or anywhere. And we want Crux Cigars to be Crux Cigars no matter where they are. I mean, it's almost, I laugh, but it's almost like if you eat McDonald's anywhere in the world, it tastes the same. Because they've grown to a substantial way of being able to control. They have the most control out of any food industry in the entire world. Like, I've eaten McDonald's in multiple countries, and it's the same. And yeah, there might be some different things on some different menus in some different countries. But if you go order a Big Mac in every country, it tastes the same. And that's because they've got that quality and the consistency that are the most important. Because price dictates whatever, but the quality and the consistency is the two most important things when it comes to the end consumer.
And the aspect of availability and having inventory is something that I would assume on a lot of shows and podcasts is probably not talked about as much, because it's always about the blend and creating something new and the this and that. But the sheer unromantic part of the supply chain and making sure that you are consistent, not just in the way you blend and manufacture, but also how you deliver and how you make sure that all your accounts are properly stocked. That's probably something that not a lot of people talk about. And it takes time, it takes experience, and a lot of skill and finesse to sort of balance that with the cash flow on the one hand, the inventory, getting stuff from the factory, from the warehouse to the retailer, and make sure that you're always selling enough, but not overselling, because at some point, as you rightfully said, an SKU could just be gone from the humidor because it was so popular, but then you don't have any left. So what's next? I think that's a very important conversation to be had. So kudos to that.
But definitely, I mean, like the whole process. I mean, we always say there's product, people, and process. And if you don't have a great process, you don't have any product. Yeah. And then you need good product to hire people to create that whole network. So for us, it's very, very, very much obviously a product first, but in order to get the product, you have to have a process. And like you said, we're not perfect. I make a lot of mistakes on a daily basis anyways. I mean, if I think we need, 500,000 cigars and we sell 600,000, we're 20% oversold. That's a bad deal. I would rather think we need 500,000 and sell 400,000, because then we're undersold and we have cigars. Because as a growth of a brand, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of money left on the table if you don't sell them. But then if you can't sell them more because they are saying, well, you're hard to work with, you don't have product. And the problem with cigars, it's hand rolled. It's a industry that you can't turn on a machine that say make more. You have to wait sometimes year, 2-3 years from the growth of tobacco. And you have to forecast that whole process from this is how many we need next year. And that's why the slow annual growth year over year is so much easier to forecast success than saying, okay, I'm going to come to a cigar company and yes, I'm going to start with 10 million cigars. Well, are those 10 million good? Are they all the same? Are they great? And yeah, that also is going to cost you quite a bit more money to make 10 million cigars. So obviously we don't sell 10 million cigars a year, but maybe one day I'd love to sell 10 million cigars that taste the same as they do today.
Question from Ian. Ian, you're on mute.
Hi, Casey. I'm over in England, so we don't yet have your cigars. Can you tell us a bit about?
I apologize for that.
No, that's all right. And they'd be very expensive here because of our taxes, as you probably know, which are very high. So, a $10 cigar will be £25, which is about $30 or something over here.
You guys got to work hard then. You got to work hard to smoke that cigar.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about the process of doing the blending. I mean, who is doing it? Are you doing it just for yourself? I mean, Steve Saka famously just makes cigars that he likes, doesn't care if other people like them, but they happen to like them and they're great. But how do you go about selecting the blends, and who's involved in that, and how do you decide on the final blend?
So my cousin Jeff does all of our direct blending. He's the genius behind the blends that we finalize, that we have. He starts them. It's his mind. I mean, he spent the time. He's got a consumer first mindset. It has truly nothing to do with what we like. It has everything to do with what do we think consumers are going to like in a portfolio that would be a Crux consumer. We want 3 basic things. We want quality cigars with quality tobacco that finish clean. We want that tobacco to be a enjoyable experience. So nothing we do is going to be over strength. It's not going to be super powerful because it's really hard to make really, really strong cigars. Because the only way to do that is under fermented tobacco or upper Ligero primings. And putting all upper Ligero primings in a cigar is very, very, very potent. So it's very difficult for a Crux cigar to be super strong. But on the other side is we also don't want it to be very bland, because there's massive conglomerate companies that make very, very, very neutral cigars, we'll call them, that sell more than we'll ever sell in our lifetime, but you can't compete with their prices. So you have to have a unique experience. So Jeff does all of our blending, but when it comes to the process, I mean, we source different tobaccos. So we're always trying something new. And the difference that we have with Plasencia and AJ, we bring tobaccos into their factories. That is unique because they allow us to do it. And there's no other, I don't know if there's another company that can say, hey, Nestor Plasencia lets me bring my own tobacco in for him to roll for me. So we have that availability. So we can make some unique cigars, but then, Jeff will come up with a blend or a thought or a epiphany of something that's new, and we'll go from, step 1 of first iteration to how many ever it takes. And when it comes to final blending, I mean, I'm really there just for a second set of eyes, second mouth that gets to taste it. And, we obviously run it through obviously some quality control and some market research with the factory people, as well as obviously we still have a retail store in Minneapolis, but our team looks at it. But Jeff makes all the decisions when it comes to final blending. People always ask me once, what's the most fun about blending? I go, nothing's fun about blending, because you're smoking raw, unaged tobacco that generally is going to leave you spinning and maybe a little bit sick. So we start a tobacco blend, and Jeff will be like, "Hey, what do you think?" I'll be like, "Well, is it good?" If he says no, I'm not smoking it. Like, I mean, he's a lot smarter than me, tenfold, and he's still got a lot to learn too. But we're down there so much, and the fact is, I love smoking premium quality cigars. Smoking and drinking something that is under fermented, that is underaged, that is not that enjoyable. But the thing that I think I do well for us is that I'm very in depth and in tune with the consistency. So I can be like, ooh, this one's a little off. What's a little bit different here? There's a subtle nuance in these cigars. My palate's pretty experienced from just tasting a lot of different things, but I am no means our blender. And Jeff always says, when are you going to learn to blend? I said, why? When we have you.
And are you using tobacco from other countries apart from Nicaragua?
We use tobacco from currently in blends that are on the market. We use Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican, broadleaf from Connecticut, or from Pennsylvania broadleaf. We use a Connecticut seed for our Connecticut, and then working with some Cameroon from Africa, but that's not out yet. But so predominantly Nicaraguan, but all the wrappers, we have a Ecuadorian, 2 Ecuadorians, 1 Connecticut, 1 Mexican San Andreas. So the root of it is the filler binders are mostly from Nicaragua for the most part, but the wrappers have to be versatile based on what's, in our mind, the best Crux cigar.
Thank you. And I've been to Crux Cigar now 3 times and love it. And I hope you can present there, because I think it's a very good showcase for your cigars.
Thank you. Yeah, one day, one day,
maybe Crux could be part of it.
Yeah, hopefully they can. I mean, because they just canceled it, didn't they?
Yeah, it was canceled again for 22, unfortunately.
Yeah, so hopefully one day we can get all those back, and those events. We haven't obviously had the ability to be at one of those yet, but one day we look forward to it.
Thank you.
Right over to our dear friend in California, Brian. Good to see you, my man.
Hey, good afternoon. Hey, Casey.
How you doing?
Good. Beardy guys unite. You said you're from Minnesota originally?
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So my wife is from there. She lost her accent when she went to NYU. How'd you get rid of yours?
Well, I think education, from the fact that both my parents were educators. They made me go to college. They made me learn. They made me read. They made me travel. And then I haven't lived in Minnesota, which I can kick out some Minnesota accents at times if you need me to.
Oh, God.
But I haven't lived there in, well, almost 15 years. So I think it's migrated, and people kind of figure out where you're from eventually. But sometimes my buddies will be like, that was Minnesotan.
Yeah, it comes out every once in a while. Hers comes out when she gets too drunk or angry. So I'm curious about I like the simplicity of the look, I'm curious about the name Crux. I mean, it looks nice. It's like, we look good in like a trade show, it kind of reminds me of like the name and look of like a Vegas nightclub, like, oh, have you been to Crux? Oh yeah. It's in the Bellagio, but,
classic, iconic, clean, elegant. I love all those things. We'll associate ourselves with Bellagio. If you're watching the Bellagio, let's talk.
Yeah. So I think that's great. Just the name itself, is there like a fun story behind that? Or
kinda. I mean, so Crux is a kind of a unique word. It basically, it means decision-making process. What's the crux of the matter? And the way we came about it was we didn't want to be very disingenuous. We're obviously from Minnesota. We're German, Norwegian heritage descent. And we didn't want to name it some Cuban-esque type brand, because that wouldn't be true to who we are as a family. And we didn't want to use our last name because we just wanted it to be a brand. We didn't want it to have to be based on the shoulders of our name. And so we went through a naming process. And pretty much anybody that could spit out anything they wanted to, we put it on the list. And we had hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and we started crossing them off. And so Jeff's original business partner at his retail store would always walk in and say, what's the crux of the matter today? So he said, let's put Crux on the list. And he's like, yeah, whatever. We'll put it on the list. And you think of, what a lot of people say is kind of stupid half the time, but then when you revisit it and we got down to, I don't know, 10 or so names, it was still on the list. And then it came to a process of what can we trademark, what isn't used, and what's available. And the more we talked about it, the more specific and precise it was as a word. It's just easy. It's just Crux Cigars. And the meaning then comes into play with it does mean, the decision-making process. What's the crux of the matter? It's also in Latin, it means crucifixion. So there's faith base behind it. Not that we talk about anybody else's faith, but everybody in the world has some sort of faith. And whatever faith means to you, I mean, there ties into that. And as well as there's a constellation, which is kind of a unique experience of, what's kind of out there is unknown. So for Crux, it's the decision-making process to earn your cigar with the faith that you have, as well as the unknown that succeeds us in the world today.
Cool. Yeah, you had an answer at the ready. That's great. Yeah, it became the crux of your list, which is kind of nice.
There it is.
One more, if that's okay. Just in the wine world, people talk. I've heard this kind of saying thrown around a lot, where if the label is just beautiful and it's like this amazing artwork and it's so fancy and super cool looking, a lot of times people are like, oh, that's a deterrent because it can kind of mask maybe like a lesser quality wine. Do you think there's some truth to that in the cigar world too, in labeling?
I think we are so far behind in marketing and labeling than the wine world is. Our industry is tiny compared to the wine world. We look at trade show sizes every year, and the cigar trade show is on such a small scale compared to, that international, because everybody thinks, I mean, even in this country, they deemed liquor an essential product during the pandemic. Cigars were not essential. So it's more accepted. So I think the amount of marketing and research that goes in for a new wine company to how to get glitz and glam, to put whatever juice in that bottle, I think it can be a deterrent of like, ooh, this is a little gimmicky, this is too much, but in cigars, we are a traditional, old school industry that hasn't had a lot of iterations over the, decades and decades. So I think when some people do it, there may be those few that are like, oh, that's just marketing. But when you have marketed to a certain company like ours has and our size, I think people say they're willing to give us a shot because we don't overmarket. I think there is that case. If we made a cigar that was held by, some 24 karat gold, hands that said, here's one cigar that costs $10, like, how do you market 24 karat gold into one cigar? Like, so the difference being it's a economical price. So it's palatable, both obviously for the, like I said earlier, for the pocketbook as well as the mouth. But I think because ours is a little subtle and it's just different colors, yeah, we deterred some people, I'm sure. But I think as a whole, for our company specifically, it's well represented or well received because we haven't overdone it and we haven't overpriced it.
Cool. Awesome. Great answers. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
I very much like the fact, Casey, that a bit earlier you mentioned you shied away from using all those like Cuban references and coming up with some weird story of some ancestors and old recipes you found in the backyard, like dating back to old Cuban and all that bollocks. Yet you use some Cuban references in your blend.
Sure, we do like to tie history into whatever we're doing. Jeff and I both love history. I mean, history is where our industries come from, obviously, and Cuba is the first and foremost of the cigar world. So when we were doing our original launches, we wanted to tie some Cuban history into our American company. And so we came out with one of our original releases was a 7x33 size that's called the Nympha. So we had a size like that. We have a cigar called the De Connoisseur, which is actually currently in our portfolio, which is based off of the name, the Crux, or the Cuban De Connoisseur, the Partagas De Connoisseur series. So we copied their sizes, obviously created our own blend. And then we have a Marblehead finish, which is essentially the old Cuban 109, which is a hacked off torpedo, more rounded off bellicoso type of thing, which allows a little bit more smoke control. And then obviously the biggest one is the word epicure. Obviously, that's a truly, historic word in the Cuban cigar world. Thankfully, we own the trademark in the United States, so we won't run into issues in there. Everything we use, we have trademark that we can do here in this country. So maybe we'll run into some issue at some point in an international market, but I don't feel like Cuba can hold a lot of trademarks there that we can't. But it's more of a appreciation for history, and saying, obviously we weren't the first to do this, we won't be the last, but paying a little bit of homage to where our industry came from, I think is crucial to the development of not forgetting, who did it first. And that's why you try to pay a few accolades to, the people that paved the way.
And then we had another quick question from our dear friend Eric over on Facebook. He said, you mentioned that you blend cigars for the consumer, but do you have certain private blends that are not intended for consumers, but just for your own enjoyment?
No, we don't do anything private that's just for our own enjoyment. I think, anything that we think is incredible enough for our customer, we want people to experience. But we're very, very particular with what comes out. Like, don't get me wrong, I smoke, I don't know how many different, I smoke cigars made by other companies very, very, very frequently, probably more than most people. Because you got to learn about what's selling. What's your best cigar in your humidor? What's selling the best? We want to know. So my favorites are, we have a lot of blends that I like, but I like them differently. You look at them as children, like you love them all, but you like them differently. So private blends, no. I mean, there's cigars that we blend with that we're like, man, this one could be good, but can we sell it? But if we can't sell it, we're not going to waste time making it. So there's things that we've got in our extra unreleased but I wouldn't say those are my go-tos, because we haven't spent the time and effort to make those marketable, to make them in ours. But for me, some of those private blends we speak of, I want to say that other companies have made. Like some of the companies, I think those are the private blends that I love. I mean, I still buy cigars as a consumer from multiple different manufacturers, from multiple factories, from multiple countries. I mean, like, I think if we ever stop learning, we're making mistakes. And the ability to have other people's knowledge that we can learn from and find out what's doing well at the consumer level, I think that has the ability to help us be successful as a company.
Very true. So Casey, you just attended TPE, and I mean, there was a lot of buzz around the trade show. People spoke about the increased attendance of the premium cigar industry, and there's a lot of excitement around TPE. Let's use it as a bit of a crystal ball and look into 22 in general, and what you see on the horizon for the next couple of months. So first of all, how was TPE for you? How do you see the trade show, like TPE and PCA, evolving? And what's your bold predictions for the rest of the year?
Well, TPA has done a great job over the last few years. That was our third TPE, and we've attended every PCA since 14. Somebody else can do the math for me, how many ever shows that's been, and we will attend this year. But TPE has kind of changed their philosophy. Obviously, it's a tobacco plus expo. So it encompasses a lot of people that are not in our premium cigar industry into our cigar industry. So you get some of those educational seminars, some of those education that you're giving to broaden the horizon, which I think they've done a great job. But then on the internal side, as a premium cigar business, like, we needed competition in our domestic trade show for the fact that the PCA is the heart and soul of our industry. That is our domestic trade show. That is even international for some people come to it. But competition breeds excellence. And if you don't have something that's pushing you to do better, you will just become stagnant. And I think we got to the point with, we got one trade show, there's no competition. We're just going to do it this way, and this is what's right. Well, what we found is, somebody wanted to challenge that a little bit. And now the TPE it's a viable competitor. I mean, is it as good? No. Is it as well attended? No. From a premium cigar standpoint. Is the trade show way larger? Yes. The TPE is way larger as a whole because of all the other tobacco plus. We'll just say tobacco plus. But they make it very different inside that trade show in the TPE for it to be a mini cigar show. I mean, yeah, you can see people walking around that are different. You get a few different smells, but it truly, I feel like we have a mini beginning of the year trade show, and it's well attended. More manufacturers find it relevant. I mean, you see, some of the biggest names in the world are there. I saw Davidoff was there this year. I mean, like, that's showing that it's growing, it's viable. I remember a few years ago when we first started, it was very, very small. And even before that, a few years, I had an industry friend who went to it a couple years before. He was like, you should go. It's cheap, it's easy, it's successful, less ROI, or not less ROI, less upfront money. So the ROI just doesn't have to, overly get huge numbers. And it's been successful for us. I mean, it almost feels like we get twice a year. Last year, unfortunately, it was in May and July because of the pandemic. There was too close, so it was very difficult to manage two of them. But now we have, January and July, and beginning of the year, end of the middle of the year. And I think that can only help us breed better products, better way to do business for our manufacturers, as well as education for our retailers, which then passes along to the consumer in this, like we use the word, mini boom. And then hopefully that springs forward into the availability for people to travel internationally this year. And hopefully Dortmund, we spoke about it offline earlier, which we have never attended. And I hope to attend it as not a displayer this year, but just as a patron, because I feel like for us to grow in the international market, I feel like that obviously is the international trade show. So I'm really excited about the outlook of 2022 as an industry as a whole, because of the energy that was inside our section, the amount of people that were there, the retailers that were there, the buying power that they are having, as well as the information that they seek. So I think because we were kind of tied down for the last 18 months with very limited, access to each other now, like you said, in this country, we're kind of operating as the world's obviously cautiously and safely as we can, but we're a little bit more free over here to go about obviously our own country because of, the size of it. And I travel on a weekly basis still, but it's domestic. But I'm really excited about the outlook of 22 for the industry as a whole.
It's amazing to hear. Have you seen any indications as to different opinions on that, or challenges that you're facing, also because of like we briefly mentioned the lack of rollers, especially down in Nicaragua? I'm sure that's something that's heavily affecting Plasencia and AJ as well, but can you also feel that directly as a brand? And do you think is that only temporarily, so that we'll get over it once the whole pandemic shit is over?
Well, I think for short term, I think it's definitely affecting everybody. The amount of cigars that are being rolling, and for companies that make way, way more cigars than us, they feel it even more because, we're not trying to turn out, like I said, 10, 15, 20 million cigars a year. We're at a fraction of that. But so for us, I think it's more easily manageable because it's smaller scale. But I think long term, with the way the pandemic has affected, those countries, Nicaragua, as you spoke, where our cigars are made specifically, having a conversation that, there's busloads of people leaving Nicaragua due to, just wanting to leave the country with some of the new regulations that have been impacted even in our country that are allowing, immigrants to leave. So as a long term, hopefully we are able to satisfy the needs of those countries to hire them to do products at a quality that we manage, or that we need for the quality of standards around the world. But it's not it's the short term, yes, but as a long term, having a discussion with Nestor not too long ago, it's the long term effects that hopefully, people searching for better quality of lives, because as a first world country in the United States, like, we were highly affected of it because of what we do, but we were also easier adaptable with the infrastructures that we have, with the medicines that we have, with different things, where people were now looking for help. They needed more money, they needed more availability of food, of resources. Thankfully we have that here in our country for the majority of people that are looking for it. But there will be, with some of those immigration things that are happening, there could be long-term effects that we won't know any of those courses for years to come. And I'm no immigration expert, but we do know that people are leaving Nicaragua on record numbers currently, based on trying to do and find things that they need because of what affected their country. Because tobacco is a big part of Nicaragua, but it's not the only part of Nicaragua. So not every industry has boomed like tobacco. There's industries that are failing miserably. And one of them is tourism. And Nicaragua was a big tourism country. So those people that were in those tourism industries, they're almost non-existent. Unless people are traveling there, they need to find money to feed their families. And they had to look different ways, different abilities. So we'll see. Long term, hopefully the world bounces back to a bigger and stronger place. I think as the humankind, we're resilient people, where, you know, there's always going to be obstacles like we spoke about, but I feel like, you know, people are resilient and we'll find ways to do bigger and better things as, you know, as a world. And that's obviously the humanity aspect of it is, but we want people to do what they feel is right and what is best for themselves as well.
Now, before we wrap things up, Casey, for you personally, when you look back at your entrepreneurial journey, everything that you have accomplished with Crux Cigars, what's your own ambition? What's your own goal when you look into the future? What are some of the things that still sort of spark your interest, or where you'd still love to explore certain new territories and venture into?
I think for us, I'll say for us first, as well as me personally, it's just the challenge of success. It's the ability to create something that is ours, the ability to grow that to a scale, to create jobs for more people, to service and, you know, provide an income for multiple families, provide generational wealth, to find the ability that this is bigger than just, you know, obviously than Jeff, than me, than my other, I mean, it's truly just creating that competition in ourselves to be the best we can do it. And I think growing through our guidelines of quality and consistency through the United States market, and then the steps to an international market in our own path, when, and not if, but when we do it, it will be on our terms and the way we want to do it. And then be the ability to travel and see more of the world. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been to Nicaragua 100 times. I've obviously traveled this country, but I am a very, very raw, uneducated world traveler as a whole, because we don't I mean, you don't get the freedom to be in, you know, the European market, the Asian market, you know, the Indian market, the Australian market, all these other places, the Canadian market, even though I lived in Canada playing baseball for a little while. But like that true understanding of a global impact, I think to me is the biggest challenge to, or the biggest obstacle, or not, the biggest prize for success is to be able to adapt and say, okay, yeah, it worked in the United States. Is it going to work in the whole world? Well, we'll figure it out. And I think it's the competitive drive that, you know, Jeff and I have, as well as the rest of our company, my cousin Tony and our other executive, Sam. And we just want to build something that we're proud of. And where that goes, hopefully, obviously, like I said, you know, it'd be 30 years from now, or 22 years from now, at that 30-year mark, that would be a great part to say, you know, we've built this company and we're in, you know, 100 of countries, we sell X amount of cigars, and being able to look over the fact that it's something that we accomplished based on the competition that we set for ourselves.
Well, and it certainly has been a tremendous journey already, and very interesting what you have accomplished in the last 8 years. And it's truly amazing to see like the passion and the enthusiasm, but also the creativity and everything that goes into strategically building a reputable long-term brand that is there to, you know, stand the test of time as well. And I want to congratulate on everything that you have accomplished. And I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn a little more about Crux Cigars, your personal journey, based on all the comments that I saw over on Facebook and our international audience here. I think a lot of new cigar enthusiasts and Crux enthusiasts have had the opportunity to learn about your brand, and I hope we could create some anticipation for everything that you do. And for
well, tell them to just hold on a little bit longer. I'll get there eventually. I will say when, but feel free to follow us on social media at Crux Cigars. We also have personal ones. I'm at Casey Haugen Crux, Jeff Haugen Crux, and Tony Haugen Crux, Sam Ventura Crux, whatever. But Crux Cigars, follow us there. You can check out our webpage. Obviously, it is sold directly here in the United States. Not from our webpage, but from our retail partners. There is retailers that will ship across the country. We don't have a quite list of that will ship internationally. We are working on that. So for the short term, but we look forward to expanding our horizon, and we hope people receive it as well as we've had it received here. But I do have one question before we sign off. With all this beautiful wallpaper you have behind you, what is the one bottle that you're most proud of?
Well, it's actually not a wallpaper, but the bottle that I'm most proud
No, I know, no, it's wallpaper to me. I know it's real. I know it's real.
This is the bottle that I'm most proud of. It's because I actually blended this cognac here. It's a roughly, on average, 35-year-old XO cognac from the Grand Champagne region. A small Bouilleur de Cru has made this and was responsible for this. And I had the pleasure of blending this particular one for an Austrian gentleman and an Austrian entrepreneur. And I introduced him to the Bouilleur de Cru, the manufacturer of this, and was involved in the blending. And it's with real Swarovski crystals on the label here. And a wonderful project that I was very honored to support and work on as a consultant.
Well, one day when I go over to Austria, we'll sit and sip and we'll smoke cigars.
I look forward to that. You'll be my guest, and it will be a pleasure to take care of you once you're over
Thank
here.
you for your time. I appreciate you having me on again. We're at cruxcigars.com, Crux Cigars on social media. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and feel free to reach out to us. Anybody has any questions, but first and foremost, thank you for putting up with my busy schedule to get me on here eventually. And we look forward to another time in the near future.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you. All the very best. Blessings to the family. And I look forward to seeing you and smoking a cigar with you super soon. All the very best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.